Well, hello. This is my mandolin case, but it's not my mandolin that's inside it. It's a banjo that fits in my mandolin case. So I thought I'd talk about that build and to get some picks out of my pocket. So I kind of had been thinking I'd like to build another mountain banjo, and because I sold the first one I built, and so I didn't have one, and I thought, well, build one. And then I thought, well, if I make a string droneless, of course I can tune it a little bit like a guitar. I'm able to play banjo, a 5-string banjo as is, but I feel the 6-string droneless gives me a little more versatility. It's just a personal preference. In any case, I thought I'd do that, and this is the final outcome. The reason I use black skin, I just kind of like the looks of a black skin, and it matches the black dots. So what we have here is the basis of the banjo is 3 pieces of mahogany that's stacked together, and it squeezes the skin. If you really want to know how a mountain banjo works, you can go to in the playlist under instrument builds. I have a video on there on how to build a mountain banjo, and it goes into a lot more detail. And but I'll also be showing some details of this build in a little bit. And the fretboard is walnut, and everything else is mahogany, and it has this other piece is actually a resonator. It's just a flush mount resonator, doesn't come out the sides. Just gives a little more push. I didn't want it to be really loud. And it has nylon strings. The scale length is short. It's 20, I think it's 21 inches, or 21 and a half, something in that nature. And the reason for the confusion is I made a mistake. I made a lot of mistakes on this one, which is a little unusual. I'm not bragging, but it's unusual to make so many mistakes as I did. And then I fixed them. And so in the process of this video, after this clip where I'm introducing this instrument, I go through how I built it, and I talk about some of the mistakes and how I repaired them, etc. One of the first mistakes, I traditionally always put the fretboard onto the neck before I carve the neck. I've just done it like that without a hitch or a hiccup or a problem in every single build. And for whatever reason, I got in a hurry this time, and I chipped a big chunk out of the fretboard, and I had to make some hard putty with some glue, Type Bond 2 glue, and some sawdust from the walnut, and it blends in pretty well. It's here on the 4th fret, and I shaped it to the side and all of that, and I'll talk about that later on. And so in the process of building this, I took video of the things I had to deal with and some of the changes I needed to make. Another mistake I made, I measured the whole thing by an inch. In my head, I was thinking one thing and I did another. So the scale is an inch longer, roughly, than I anticipated. I actually was going to put the 0 fret here. I don't know why I did that, but I did, and it's a fairly happy accident. The only issue was I ran out a lot of space. It's pretty tight here at the base to get the bridge on. But it did work, and I just, initially I built the tone ring. It was too small. I had to make some adjustments to fit this. Then the skin looked wrinkly. You'll see all that if you care to watch it. So I had to build a new tone ring, and after I built the tone ring, I had a really nice fit here. You can see I curved the feet of the outside feet of the bridge a little just to get it. It's unnecessary. It just looks nicer, and did a lot of that kind of stuff. The strings on it are Aquila red ukulele strings. They're not really guitar strings. And the reason for that is they have a density to produce lower tones with shorter scales. My original plan was to measure it out so that it would tune to a standard tuning. By mismeasuring, the mistake I made there, I ended up with it tuning standard -1, so it actually is deeper. And the decals on the front, I'm just telling all my secrets. The inlay decals on the front are there because you know, we had a lot of issues, and in the middle of this build we had a family crisis where my oldest daughter, her kidneys shut down and stuff like that, so I was pretty distracted. I guess that could be my excuse. But when I got back after being gone for 10 days at the hospital with her, I went to drive the screws to squeeze the skin, and I got carried away and drove them through the front, which is not something I do, but I did. And so these hide the damage that I created. And so I've got a mismeasure, I have a chip, I damaged the front by driving some screws too far through it, all of that. I just drilled holes to tie the strings on the tail. That's not uncommon on a hardwood mountain banjo to do that. Yes, I did put electronics in it, which is kind of fun, and in a little bit I'll plug that in to my teeny amp, and we'll see how that sounds. But thought I'd show you how this sounds the way it is. So that's essentially how it sounds. It's a nice little package, not very big. Like I said, it fits in my mandolin case, which means I can use it as carry-on luggage on an airplane, travel around with it. It's just a lot of fun. It actually came out, even with all the mistakes and boo-boos, it came out to be a nice, pretty looking instrument, and I'm quite happy with it. So I'm going to pause for a minute and get my amp hooked up, and I'll just show you how the electronics work real quick. So just before I plug it in, when I said amp, I meant my little Spark Binny. I didn't want to drag out a big amp. One of the things I did on the bridge, this is a different bridge, this was an experimental one, was I used these tips. They're cleaning rods for welding tips, and they make nice little slot files. And so I just found one that fit, that was the right size for the string, and I just worked them at an angle like this. I hope you can see past my picks, and did that, so I got a nice clean edge, the same semi-round experience for the strings, and it actually gives it a much smoother, cleaner tone. So that's just an interesting, I hope interesting little tip. The electronics, no big deal. I put an in-pin jack in here, and it's just one of those little brass paddles with a couple wires as a transducer pickup, and it's stuck to the skin right about there. And that's it. It's not anything fancy, complicated, or unusual. So if I turn my amp on, and I don't know what volume to put. Let's see if I go down here, it sounds a little different. And I admit, we don't usually think of electrifying banjos as much because they're pretty loud to start with, and they're obviously a lot easier to mic, etc. I just did it because you never know, I might need it sometime. And that's the whole story on this instrument. And the rest of this video will just be the various segments in the build where I was working on it, and the clips where I talked about how I put it together, and I have the pieces apart, and I talk about how it squeezes the skin and etc. I chose, now I normally wouldn't do this when building a mountain banjo because it's kind of a, it's not as natural of a way, but I chose to use the synthetic skin on this particular instrument. Normally, when I was building a mountain banjo, I would use natural goat skin. And the other video on how to build a mountain banjo covers that and even shows you how to put the goat skin in. Building a tigerwood mountain banjo, I think that video shows you how to stain the skin, which is a nice, warm, pleasant tone. It seems much more natural. The point of the synthetic is simply it's less sensitive to weather and climate change. And I thought, well, since I might want to use this to go places, the synthetic's a lot more durable, and I don't have to I don't have to show the kind of care for this black synthetic skin that I'd have to show for an actual natural goat skin. So that's the point there. Hope you enjoyed this, and Lord bless you till the next time. The rest of the video on how I built it and the process is after this clip. Thank you. The project I'm working on is I want to make a travel size mountain banjo, and this particular one's going to be a 6-string droneless mountain banjo, and the goal, of course, is to make it fit in a mandolin case. But I thought I'd go ahead and document the process of how I do that. There's another video I had done years ago on how to build a mountain banjo. You're welcome to watch that. It seems many people have appreciated it, and it's a learning experience for how to build one. And they're not that complicated, and that's the real point of it, isn't it? That most anyone with some kind of woodworking skills can easily build a mountain banjo. and I just like people to know how if they'd like to. So the first part is this is the beginning. It started with just boards. The day before yesterday, I cut the boards to length and width, and yesterday I planed them down. And so day 1 and 2, this would be day 3. My goal today is to cut the circular shapes out of all the pieces. So it'll start looking more like a banjo, and cut the neck to width. And so this being the headstock, I'll put one more piece, I'll glue it on like this. Well, excuse me, it goes like that. And the point of that is it allows me to cut an angled head out of it so that the strings are pulling good against the nut. And so that'll get glued on today. After I've done, you know, that's something I want to cut out, glue on after I'm done cutting everything out and stuff. So I'm working with a nice flat piece of wood. It's just easier. And then when I glue this on, I'll do 2 things. I'll cut the angle, which will come up like that, and it's about a 1/2 inch headstock, and it'll be angled. And then I will, after that, I will cut the neck width out and the headstock shape. And then of course there'll be a lot of sanding. And so what you have is I have this piece, and then I have 2 of these pieces, and the 3 pieces will stack up. And so this piece will glue on, and it'll glue in place, and it will have holes, and it'll have a circle cut. And I'll show how all that looks when I'm done. And the banjo head can go through that. And the tone ring of the banjo will go through it also. And then the back piece just sits back that far and pushes everything in. It'll have a smaller hole in the back. So we'll look at that. So that's essentially the process of making a mountain banjo, is with plank wood. And I don't always end up with as many pieces glued together as I have here. And I planed the wood first because I've done it before and I'm comfortable with it. If you really want a perfect situation, it would be wise to glue it all together and plane it afterwards. But I actually have managed to get a little arch in that, and I was thinking that would be kind of fun. And that's why they fit together as an arch. I just thought it might, I don't know why, just creative juices flowing in whatever direction. But that's it. And so the whole thing is 28 inches long from this hand to that, from my right to my left hand. And what that allows is, excuse me, I'm getting dry. What that allows is, that's how long it is inside the mandolin case. And so that's kind of, I already have the mandolin case for my mandolin. So I thought that would be fun, just to build one that'd stick in there. I like to get big sounds out of little packages if I can. So that's part of what's happening here. Turns out it's going to have a 20.5 inch scale length, which is the exact scale length of my 12 string Traveler 12 string I just built. So they'll have the same scale length. That's also fun. So hope you enjoy that, and I'll try to remember to document the process. Well, hello. Been doing a lot of little things as I said I was going to. So here's where I am in the project. And you know, honestly, I'm only working on this thing an hour or 2 a day. I'm not spending a lot of time on it. But I cut out the shapes and did all that yesterday. So we have this, and that gives you an idea of the size and shape of the banjo. And I glued an extra piece here, and well, you can see it, it's glued here. And I pre-drilled it before I did so that the screws drop right through the larger holes, and only attach. They drop through these holes and they attach to this piece here, and it works really well, and it creates tension on the drum head. And of course, because of the thickness of this, to get the drum head to fit, I had to route it out, and I got into it, and I got some of it, but to finish it I had a really dull bit, and I didn't bother sharpening it. So you can see I burnt it through with a dull bit, but it works, and it drops right in there. And whenever you cut a circle out of a piece of wood like I did with those, and this is just a 4-inch hole drill on that, you end up with something that looks like this. Of course, this is much smaller because out of the blanks that were cut out of the hole, I made 2 rings, glue them together, and they're just the right height that way to sit in here. And when you screw the back on, this ring pushes up against the skin and makes it tight. And it brings it flush with the front of the banjo, which is what I'm after, because I will put a fretboard on that looks, well, this is the fretboard material. I have to cut it square and do a little trimming down here on the end, but it'll go on like that. It's walnut, and we'll pretty it up, and I'll slot it. I'll put some initial slots in it for the frets prior to gluing it on, and then later I can make those slots deeper. So if you talk about drum heads, and normally when I build a mountain banjo, I use actual goat skin, which actually isn't very difficult. This space here, I would just tack and glue the goat skin in there. And there is a video, the first video I did on how to build a mountain banjo covers that, and you could watch that. And building a tigerwood mountain banjo covers how to stain a skin if you want it to look a little better. So you could look at those if you're interested. But because I'm going to haul this thing around, maybe even on airplanes, I wanted a synthetic head. And so this is just, well, obviously it's an Evans, and it's a black, it's a resonant black, they call it. It's for some sort of tom drum or conga, and but it drops in just like that. Okay, then the ring would fit in here. Sorry about that. The ring fits in and presses on the drum head, and the back then goes on, and you screw it together, and you've sandwiched your drum head in, and then your bridge will go on it, and that'll give you the sound you need. So that's what that's how far I am with it, and it takes some of the mystery out of how to do it. I hope it's not that difficult, and even though I'm making this with as a 6-string droneless banjo, you don't have to. You could make it with just 4 strings like a plectrum, or you could cut your cut a little bit out of the neck and make a 5th-string, a 5-string banjo, which has that high drone and a tuner up here. You can do that. I've done that with other banjos, but I just want to go this route, and it makes it pretty simple. And so once I get the fretboard slotted and prepared and glued on, then I'll make sure it's trimmed to fit just right. It's pretty close, really. Excuse me. And at that point, I'll glue it on, and I'll start working on carving the neck. There's a lot of sanding I need to do, but honestly, I wouldn't do the sanding until I get the neck glued on, because I want to carve the neck, and I prefer to do it with the fretboard glued on, personally. And I'll carve the neck, and then after I carve the neck, then everything will be ready to sand at that point. So you may not see me until after I've sanded everything, and that's where it starts to slow down. So as I mentioned, I made a number of mistakes on this travel banjo that fits in a mandolin case, and I wanted to talk about it before I fixed everything and altered it a little bit. And one, I chipped the fretboard. I always like to glue the fretboard on and then carve the neck, And I've never had this problem before, but I got in a hurry and I had a knot in the fretboard, which I thought looked cool. So I chipped a chunk out and I had to make a wood putty out of glue and walnut sawdust and work that in there. And it works and it blends in pretty well. I'm kind of stuck with that. The big thing I did was I mismeasured, and it could turn out to be a happy accident. But the scale length, I meant to start here at this fret, and I started up here. I made the scale length too long, and when I did that, that moves the bridge way down here on the tail. It almost, well, at first it didn't work because it wanted to sit on the tone ring. I had to cut out the inside of the tone ring and make it thinner and push it, because I also made the tone ring too small, push it way to the bottom. The bridge works and it sounds good. So I'll continue with that. Obviously I can't change the scale length now. And as I said, I made the tone ring too small. That's why the skin doesn't look right. It's not big enough around, so I've already made another tone ring that I'll be reinstalling. That should give me more of a symmetrical look. And then I broke a bit, and so I just ended up drilling bigger holes for the strings to tie them on at the tail, which I have no problem with. I just was so frustrated by the time I did it. I didn't sand it or anything, so I still have the wood sticking up, because I knew I was going to have to take the strings back off and redo things. Then in my frustration, I screwed the screws in too far and poked some of them clear through the front. And that really bugs me. So I'm going to put some more inlay flowers on over these ugly parts, and I'll sand this, and I'll have to re-clear the front of it. And then the last thing I want to do, basically the part of it is just to space it so the screws I have aren't too long and I don't have to buy a whole set of screws. I'm going to put a resonator back on it. That it gives it a little, I think will give it a little more power and depth. We'll see what it does. And that'll space, there'll be a gap, and that'll space the screws back, and there'll just be a flat piece on the back made out of mahogany. So those are the things I'm getting ready to change. Just before I do, I thought I should play it as is, and then with each step I can play it and see what the different changes do to the sound, because that's something I'm curious about. And so if I play it down close to the bridge, and if I play it in the middle, I'm doing the same riff. So then if I come up here into the scoop, so that's how it sounds now. And I think the next step is to put the larger tone ring in and see what that does to the sound. Will more surface level of the stretched skin change the sound? Of course it will. How much will it be noticeable? I have no idea. So that'll be the next step, is to change the tone ring. Also, this tone ring is solid mahogany, because I used the hole that it was cut out of. And the next tone ring is actually mahogany, pine, and mahogany. So we'll see what that changes. And then after that, then the next change would be putting the back on and see what that does. So it'll be a good learning experience. And as far as the scale length, I'm really not disappointed, because I've already talked about that, but it gives me a half a step lower tone than a standard banjo. So hope you enjoy this process. Well, hello. This is a little clip out of how to build a mountain banjo as a traveler size mountain banjo, and you'll see that in that video, but I thought I'd also keep it as a separate possibility. In the process of carving the neck, after I said I usually like to put the fretboard on before I finish carving the neck because it makes it easier, and it does, and I usually do. I messed up the fretboard. I'm using this walnut, and not everywhere is the grain straight. There's a little knot at the 4th fret, and I chipped it, and then I decided to fix it, and unfortunately I didn't decide to talk about how I fixed it before I chipped it. So I'll talk about it, and you can see it's there and it's shiny, but when you sand it, it's not. So let me explain what I did. It's pretty simple. I made there's a good little chip, you know, like a 1/4 inch chip out of the fretboard there after I'd already slotted it and glued it onto the instrument, which, you know, maybe there's a lesson there. But I just took this little piece of paper and I put some Type Bond 2 on there, and then I sanded a little piece of walnut. I have this block that I just taped some, it's just a big old block I use for all kinds of things here in the shop, and I tape sandpaper on there, and I sand little things by hand that way. And so I just made a lot of sawdust and dumped it onto my little straight edge and dumped it on the glue and stirred it up with a nail. So, you know, once I had the walnut sandings and I stirred it, I didn't use all the glue that I had on the paper. It's kind of ugly looking. Then I just stirred it up with this nail and then put it in and filled the chip. And I did a few applications of that to build it up because the glue would shrink down and different things like that. So that's what it is, and you can kind of see, just to check the color, I sanded a high spot here, and you can see that that dark shiny color goes away, and it will blend in with the fretboard. And we'll get to look at it after I'm finished and put frets on it, and it should, for the most part, allow that chip to disappear. And the reason I mention it is that's a good way to fix a lot of chips, and I didn't have to buy a special putty or anything. And this Type Bond, it grows hard, you know. It's they say it's stronger than wood. Probably is. And it gets real hard and sandable. So by putting sawdust into the glue, I made a pretty quick, easy sandable putty to fix that. And what I'm getting ready, and that's the only thing I really would talk about it as part of the build, because I've carved the neck and it's getting ready to do all the sanding that I need to do, and then we'll talk about this banjo some more. We'll continue that on the video. So, but I just wanted to cover real quickly what I did, and I hate to mention that I made a mistake, you know, like everybody else, but it occurred to me, if I talk about that and I show what I'm doing in the process, and then I show the finished product after I sand it, it's a good piece of instruction if someone's wondering what if you chip something, you know, how do you fix it? And this has served me well, this process of fixing chips, and it won't weaken the fretboard at all. It'll be plenty strong, and I'll just have to fix the grooving here with my slot saw, my file saw, which isn't an issue either, because these are just marked. They're not deep enough to put the frets in. I always do that after I'm done with the sanding. So that's what's going on today. I'm just planning on doing a lot of sanding to get all this put together and get it ready. After it's sanded completely, we'll start working on the clear coating, things like that. I have to figure out I have to drill a hole here to put an end pin jack in, because I want to put some electronics in this banjo. So all those kinds of things will be taking place, and of course the tuners will come and so on, and I'll finish working on the headstock. And probably the next thing is you'll see the finished product unless something else happens that I want to talk about. So we'll see you later on. So I'm here working on the new tone ring. This is the old one. You see it's a pretty sloppy fit, and it didn't hurt the tone, but it wasn't fitting very nicely. So I made this one, and as I said, you can see this is 2 pieces of mahogany. This is 2 pieces of mahogany with pine in the middle. It's just because it's what I had. That's how I make most of those decisions. And it may be that this tone ring's still a bit thick, and if it is, I'll have to do some trimming, but we'll see how it goes when I get ready to fasten it. It might just be a better fit, and it fits in really well. So that's going to give it, if nothing else, a better look, but it does give it more surface area for the sound once you bring tension on it. So that's what I'm getting ready to find out. And while I have my banjo apart, this is how it looks, and then this back, of course, screws on, and when it screws on, it brings tension on to the skin. So the tone ring's in there like that. This screws down and pulls on the skin and brings it tension. So that's what's going on. While I have the back off, I made this piece to be a resonator that'll fit on with the space about a 1/4 of an inch space on the back. So while I have it here, I'm going to take time to sand it, and then I'll drill the necessary holes so it all matches up while I have the back off already. So that's what's going on. Okay, so I fixed the tone ring, and you can see it fills the space better. It's clean, it's nice and tight. All in all, it just looks much better. And it caused me to take a spacer out that was behind it. For whatever reason, filling up the skin lowered the bridge and the action on it, which is good. I haven't trued my frets yet because I knew I was going to take all the strings off and have to re-clear the front. So I'll be doing that when I take it apart, but I put the tone ring in to see what changes that made. So if I do it back at the bridge, in the middle, and then in the scoop, so it's cleaner sounding. I'm happy with that. And you also, just by way of playing, you notice that the closer to the bridge you play, you get a brighter sound, sounds more like a banjo. On the guitars, it's the same thing. You get what's called a more metallic sound. And as you go closer to the fretboard, you get a fatter, fuller sound. So that's something to just think about in your playing style. And we can actually go up here. So that's fun. So the next thing is to put the back on so you can see the damage to the front in a couple places. We can't have that. So I will be fixing that and repairing it, and I'll finish sanding this so the strings look a little cleaner. You won't have those funny looking pieces of wood showing. It's all part of the process. And then the back has screws. I just made a back for it, and so that'll be the new back. I'm just waiting for the spacers. They're supposed to show up today. So when the spacers show up, I'll take the screws out and put the back on, and we'll get to see what that sounds like. It's not, the back's not completely finished in that. It's all finished sanded, and I put 3 coats of grain sealer on, which I use a spray shellac for that. But it doesn't have lacquer on it. But it's good enough for now. I'll put it on, and I'm waiting for some of the inlay markers to show up before I do the final finish work. Which is, at this point, aside from the back changing the sound, everything else is more cosmetic for my own benefit. And I know the back will change the sound because you can hear, maybe you can hear it on the video. This is away from my body, then closer to my body and right up against me. You can see it deadens it a little when you get it too close, because you're blocking all that sound that comes out of this hole. So the back should give it more of a sustained reverb echo sound. We'll find out together. It generally does give it more of an echoey sound, which is kind of what we're after. I like that ethereal sound. And we'll see. That's what's coming next. Here we are. I have put the back on. So when I say put the back on, I didn't replace the back it had. I just added a solid back to it by creating these spacers. And these are nylon spacers. And there's 4 holes that don't have the spacers, and my screwdriver just fits through there to tighten those screws. That helps gets everything in place. So that's what the back's gonna look like. This is just grain sealer. It's not, I haven't finished lacquering it because I'll have to redo this front anyhow. So when I get ready to redo it, I'll do stuff back here too. But I wanted to see the sound change by comparison. Right here holding it, what I notice is it does have more sustain and reverb. It's still going, and that's kind of fun. It just gives it a fuller echoey sound. If we do our experiment up by the tailpiece, and then if we come to the middle, and then down in the scoop. So those are the sound differences that we've done 3 different things in a row to see how it affected the sound. That makes for a nice learning curve experience. And so I just thought I'd continue with that. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed the process.